Okay, so this is Sycamore Neumeister. She is our savior today. I called her about this, maybe an hour before this yesterday or something. I called her about this time yesterday and said, Kristie, we are in a mess. We have a keynote for tomorrow who has canceled. And tell me about it. Ask me questions. I can do this. I can do it. And I can do the session on Friday. And so she jumped right in. And Kristie is a great, we could have had Kristie in the first place. She's not a substitute. And she's a professor of education psychology at Cal State and also director of their Michigan graduate licensure program. So she is gifted in her field. She does program evaluation and perfectionism, personality, and those are her kind of areas of interest. But first and foremost, she's a Sycamore parent. Yeah. She has 4 daughters, 1 who's an alum, Sycamore, and 3 who are still here.
Probably making those in the
So Kristie is going to talk to us for the next little bit less than an hour, and then we'll have our afternoon breakouts, which we'll have to wrap up. So, Dr. Kristie Spears.
Thank you. I really am so happy to be here. As Diane mentioned, I direct the Gifted and Talented Licensure Program at Ball State. And in our curriculum and instruction class, we teach teachers about the strategy of problem-based learning, where you put kids in the role of a professional and give them a problem to simulate the kinds of problems in the real world that they might be charged with solving. And we always tell teachers when you're doing that and designing those problems, make sure to throw in a, oh, by the way. So when the kids are deep in the problem-solving process and they're ready, and they're running with it, you throw them a curveball, like, oh, by the way, the budget I told you had for that, it's 20% reduced. Or, oh, by the way, we told you it had to be a 10-minute presentation, now it can only be 5. Or the model car that you're building, it needs to hold double the weight that we told you originally. Now, it isn't to just be mean, like, how can I make my kids cry today, right? Because they will cry. We all know gifted kids don't like surprises, but the point is life is about surprises, right? Life is about, oh, by the way. And so I was thinking about that yesterday. I just got to my office, which is about an hour from my house, and I'm like, okay, I got to really work on this research project, and my phone rings, and it's my mom, and they're supposed to be coming to visit on Friday from out of town, and she says, oh, by the way, we're in the car, we're on our way, we'll be at your house in 5 hours, because there's a snowstorm in Iowa, so we had to leave early. My house is a disaster, I have no groceries. I'm like, okay, I get back in the car, pack up, and drive all the way home, go to the grocery store, I'm unloading the groceries. Weird, Diane Bergman's called me. I wonder what that's about. What? Okay. I'm like, I am living the oh, by the way. So make sure you keep throwing your kids those curveballs because this is what life is, right? So we just go with it, we roll with the punches. But actually, I'm super happy to be here to talk about this. And I know you're thinking assessment, program evaluation, what? You're happy? But it is a topic that I think gets a bad rap, that we kind of hear the word and we don't necessarily, meet it with excitement. But I'm here to tell you that I have evaluated programs across the country, schools for gifted kids, from very large urban schools, 40,000 students with a magnet for gifted, to very affluent suburbs outside large metropolitan areas, small, rural, and then independent schools like most of yours. And I'll tell you, there's a common thread to this. I love going to all those different environments, right? I like seeing how gifted kids can be served kind of no matter what the environment that they're in. But when we go to those site visits, there's a common theme, always, that greets us. My colleague, Jenny Burney, and I do a lot of these together. And when we walk into that site visit, no matter where we are, it's a common experience. And can you guess what that experience is? What do you think people are thinking and feeling? dread. They see us and they're like, oh. It's kind of like going to the dentist, right? Nobody wakes up and thinks, I can't wait to get my teeth drilled today. That will be awesome. Okay, they panic. They feel full of dread, anxiety. No one wants us to come. Now, I will say there is one subset of stakeholders that is sometimes excited to see us, and those are the parents, because they've got their list of all the things that they want to see, about this program being evaluated. But generally speaking, teachers, staff, and some administrators are kind of intimidated and are full of a sense of trepidation with evaluating programs. So my job today is to convince you that this is not how it should be, that we should instead be excited and embrace this. And when I'm talking about evaluation, I'm not talking about the accreditation process, right, that we've all been through that does have a lot of anxiety associated with it. That's more of a macro level process. What we're going to be talking about today is more of a micro level analysis. So what can you do with your own students in your own classrooms, in your divisions, and across content areas to make sure that you are actually doing what you purport to be doing, that you are actually helping our kids develop the skills that we know they need to be successful once they leave us. So when we start that conversation, we need to take a step back and think, what is the purpose of a school for gifted kids, or what's the purpose of a gifted program? And I know that all of you have mission statements that were meticulously wordsmithed, right, for hours. I've been in these meetings, and we've really carefully thought about the mission and the vision. And we could kind of, if we looked at all of our different mission statements together, I think we would see that generally speaking, we would agree upon these goals for our programs, that we're trying to create a responsive learning environment that facilitates gifted students' cognitive, social, and emotional development, preparing them to be lifelong learners and meaningful contributors to society. Okay, would we agree that that's probably a good goal for our schools or our programs for gifted kids? We need to translate that into skills then. If this is what we want, what does that look like in terms of the skills that we're trying to develop for our kids? Now, I put this into a very nice, alliterative, all the C's, okay, that we want our kids to develop. Obviously, content, right? We need to make sure they're mastering and the achievement scores are where we need them to be. But we don't just want them to be book smart. They have to be good thinkers, problem solvers. And to do that, they have to have excellent critical and creative thinking skills. We want them to be able to communicate effectively in a variety of formats, oral, written, multimedia. And we need them to be able to collaborate well. We all know gifted kids in group work, that's rough, right? That's challenging for many of them. So are we making sure that they are effective collaborators with their peers? Do they have cultural competency? Do they value the backgrounds and the differences that other individuals bring to the table? And are they able to communicate effectively with anyone? Confidence. We probably all know a lot of adults that are very bright that never kind of did anything with that skill set because they were too afraid. Okay, they wanted to stay in the nice, safe zone, not do a keynote with less than 24 hours of notice. Okay, they needed to stay where it was safe. They didn't want to put themselves out there. But risk is necessary for us to grow anywhere. Commitment. Do our gifted kids give up when it's challenging, when they're a little bit worried about not being the best, the perfectionistic tendencies, or do they have a sense of commitment and perseverance even when things are challenging? A sense of community. A lot of our kids are told they're very smart, and what they want and what they need kind of takes center stage in their home environments, and we need to make sure that they're viewing themselves as meaningful contributors to their community, not just making decisions that are best for them, but that are best and allow them to use those talents to help in their communities. And finally, curiosity. Do they keep that sense of wonder that our young gifted kids always come to us with? Are they graduating with that same sense of curiosity? And it's interesting if you follow the college admissions process, as we've eliminated the SAT and the ACT and other standardized measures, this curiosity piece is getting a lot more traction. looking for it in the essays kids are writing and the different prompts that they're giving, because we need a way to find the kids who are really curious, because those are the kids who are motivated. Those are the kids who are driven, and they tend to be good problem solvers. So this is starting to take even more of a critical role than ever before. So if we can agree on our mission statement and we can break it down to these skills, I ask you, how do you know that what you're doing with your kids is developing these skills? How can we be sure of that? Do we have any data or any evidence that shows us that as a result of being in our program, our kids are leaving with these skills? Because we also have a lot of kids who come from resource-rich families. And sometimes I call these parking lot kids. They could just sit in the school parking lot all day and they would still have growth on NWEA and still have, because they're getting it, right, in the different extracurriculars and the home support. But we want to make sure that our kids are getting it because of what we're doing with them. And we're not leaving it up to chance that they will leave us with these skills, that we've purposely designed learning experiences and opportunities, and we've measured those to make sure we can document that the growth that we're seeing is truly the result of the programming that we've offered. Okay, so I want to share a tale of a high-performing district with you to kind of make the point about why it's necessary to dig a little deeper rather than kind of a surface-level look at some of what we're talking about. My colleague and I were called by a school district in the Northeast that was a very well-resourced district. And we were told, they asked us to come in and do the program evaluation. And before we go on any site visit, we do our homework, right? Figure out what can we learn about the district ahead of time. And so we started to dig in, and we were able to find out that of the nearly 700 school districts in this state, this district was in the top 1%. Okay, just think about that for a minute. It's a very high-performing district. Okay, so then we started to look at other indicators. They were national, state and national winners of all these different academic competitions that most of you are familiar with: Future Problem Solving, National History Day, Science Olympiad, these math counts, Math League. Okay, in any domain, it didn't matter what content area, these kids were nailing it at the state and the national level. Advanced placement. I don't know how many of you are secondary, but probably we're all familiar with the College Board advanced placement tests. So these are tests that are given across the country to the same test given to all the kids who are taking that course. You can score 1 to 5. A 3, 4, or 5 is considered qualifying or passing, if you will. In this high school, 66% of the high school graduates took 2,205 AP exams in 30 subject areas. That is crazy. I mean, I've looked at a lot of schools, and I could not even believe the percent of kids. So I thought, okay, are they getting 3s? Okay, you know, when we're talking about college credit, oftentimes selective colleges won't accept 3s, but College Board still counts that as passing, if you will. No, that was not the case. Almost half of them were scoring a 5. That is really hard to do. Phenomenal, right? Okay, so 93% were passing, getting a 3, 4, or 5, and almost half are getting the top score on all those 30 exams. Unreal. Okay, so then we look at their SAT performance, and you can see again it's significantly higher than the state and the national average. And the same was true, this battery's dying, sorry. The same is true for the ACT. So no matter what standardized test we were looking at. National merit, 22% of the graduating class was national merit finalist or commended scholar. I mean, I can hear the appreciation for that stat in the audience. You guys understand how dramatic that is. Okay. So if you're me at this point and you've been called to evaluate this program, what are you thinking? What am I going to say, right? Keep on keeping on. Here's the invoice. What are you supposed to say, right? So there's a little bit of panic as we're trying to do our homework. And when we think about what we can already tell in a district like this, what are some things that you can make? What observations based on the data that I've just shared? Say it again. Yeah, it's a culture that supports high achievement. What else? Wealthy. Right. Resource wealthy. Yes, lots of resources. Obviously, the teachers are well trained, right? That they can get that performance out of the kids. And the kids were probably, I would argue, pretty compliant. Okay? I mean, if they're ready to do the time, they bought into the whole system and understand it. So these are kind of the things. They have the opportunity to take all these courses, 30 different AP. They're motivated, they have competent teachers, and the whole culture kind of supports this. So that's what we can say based on the data that was kind of publicly available or ready for us to analyze. And that is usually where it ends, right? Our fact sheets or our books about our schools, these are the kind of stats that you end up seeing. And you can make a lot of conclusions about that, and parents do make these conclusions and think, I want my kid to go to a school like that. But then I encourage you to take a closer look. And I'm going to share with you some of the data that we did collect when we went on the site visit. We always do surveys, interviews, and collect a lot of other data that I'll share with you in a minute. But in the surveys, we also always ask a question about program satisfaction. And this is what the stats showed for that. So this was a K-12 school district. But you can see the primary parents, so the K-1 and 2, and the upper elementary, just about 20% were satisfied with the programming. And even when you get to the middle and high school where we saw all that outstanding performance, it's still 40% or less. We're satisfied with the program. That's weird, right? Wouldn't you think, given that the kids had access to all those opportunities, that those numbers would be higher? I certainly did. So then you look into the survey further, and we found 31% of high school students and 22% of parents said that school had a negative or very negative impact on attitude towards learning. Okay? This battery's going to be no good. In contrast, though, only 5% of teachers thought that. So big discrepancy between what the families are experiencing and what the teachers think is going on. 68% of high school students said they were stressed most or all of the time. However, only 37% and 42% of faculty thought that students were stressed. So again, they're aware of the stress, but not to the extent to which that was occurring. Now I want to share with you, we always offer comment opportunities for kids and all the stakeholders in the survey data that we collect. And I just pulled out a few of them, but they really kind of tell a story. So be patient when I read some of these to you. And I want you to be thinking about what other observations you can make based on the voices of the parents and the students. Okay, this student said, I believe that the education I'm receiving is great and I'm thankful, but it would be nice not to feel like the underdog and that everything is a competition. We need to be more focused on learning to have knowledge for the real world rather than always learning for a test that after which we just forget the material. Please do something about the level of competition among the students and the level of stress. It's admirable that our school district is comprised of so many gifted and talented students, but it's difficult for students to really find their own paths and be generally interested in what they learn when they're constantly having to compete against their peers. I think that it would be incredibly beneficial if this school district established partnerships and companies would allow students to intern or see how their studies could actually be applied outside the classroom. Through this, students would be able to find their own unique paths, and the competition wouldn't be taken as personally. In such an academically competitive environment, it's so difficult to stand out. But when students begin to realize that they can stand out in other aspects, such as their own interests or future career paths, well, then school becomes more meaningful to them. School becomes a place to prepare them for their future, not just a competition. Please have more frequent discussions regarding the interests of students, their goals for the future, possible careers or colleges, or conversations like such. I feel that students would be more involved, which would positively influence their learning experience. Change the mindset of people in this district, the parents, the teachers, the students. Have them become aware that there's more to life than taking 25 APs by the time the student graduates and getting A's in all of them. That will alleviate the pressure on students to take as many APs as possible. But I'm aware this change is unlikely to happen before I graduate. You can't tell students not to stress out about grades. They've heard that before. They need help and guidance while they're going through the process, preferably from other students. Without a doubt, learning is something I'm grateful for, but the amount of stress is the issue that I see. In this district, people aim really high, which makes it difficult to stand out among them. With this competition, it's abnormally high. Stress is literally everywhere I go. In the hallways, there aren't discussions about someone's weekend or a movie or anything like that. Every conversation that goes on is about the amount of stress piled on the students and comparison of teachers. I hate going to school. Clubs are perhaps the only positive school experience other than my friends. For me and many other kids in my classes, perhaps an overwhelming number, school is no longer about learning, it's about grades. Potential B's cause me stress every single day. I absolutely do not enjoy my classwork or my homework due to the amount of weight everything has. No attempt is made to explain course material or explore it in any depth. It's all about formulas, AP strategies, and checklist-like essays. And finally, I love learning, but after this school district experience, I think school is a prison that we just live through in order to get on with our life. I've begun to hate learning, if I'm to be completely honest. I feel like school is beating the learning out of me to the point where I dread rather than enjoy it. Coming out of 12 years in this district, I've learned one thing: a grade, a percentage, or a point is to be valued over everything else. That includes sleep, family, and personal health. You guys need to fix the system as soon as possible. Okay, now there were like 500 comments similar to this that we just pulled examples. But what do you hear, what do you notice when you read through or you think about what kids are experiencing in this district? Go ahead, Lori.
No community.
Right. Everything's a competition. Good. What else? No joy. School is a prison. They beat the learning out of us. Now, think back to our mission, lifelong learners. Blah, blah. Are we accomplishing this? No. Go ahead.
There's no space for like neurodivergence amongst the students.
Right. Everybody feels pigeonholed, that this is the one path to be successful. Okay, go ahead, Denise.
As a parent, that's terrifying to me about the children.
But as a parent, if you were looking at that fact book and all those stats, you would think this is where I want my kid to go. Exactly. And this is the whole point why we have to take a deeper dive in. We can't just look at what's easily available and what are the stats. We have to look at the experiences that our kids are having. And a lot of us are teaching at schools that are very well resourced, and you probably have kids like this who are very academically motivated, driven, and competitive. And we have to be careful with the kind of environment that we are cultivating so they're getting what they need and they're well prepared, but they have that sense of community that Lori talked about, that they do have that camaraderie, that sense of community, all the other skills that we went through at the beginning of the presentation. So that's kind of what I'm going to talk to you today. Sorry, we went through this already, but these are kind of the observations that I had. Okay, so what can we do then? How do we take a deeper look? What does that mean when you say that? Look at these skills. We need to isolate what is really important to us, from that list of skills or others that you might have, and try to think, what are we going to focus on? What do we really want to make sure that we are doing for our kids and that we're documenting that they are getting what they need before they leave us? So this is a process that you can follow, and this process can be followed individual classroom teachers or at the division level or looking across content areas. And I can send you all these slides, no worries, I forgot I should have said that at the beginning, but you can just listen without panicking about writing it down. Okay, but when you're doing a process like this, first you need to start at the beginning. What elements do you want to look at, right? And is it a particular skill or domain? Maybe you want to look at the development of executive functioning skills from early childhood through middle school. Or maybe you really want to pay attention to your social and emotional programming as a domain. Or it's a content area. We have to look at, our social studies. We cover Civil War 3 times, okay? So we've got redundancy or gaps. So you can choose and think about that as a school or program level. What do you really want to focus on? And then once that's decided, you need to determine the scope. Is this just an early childhood initiative? Is it going to be whole school or, somewhere in between? So kind of wrapping yourself around what is the scope of this going to look like. Now, a caution here, time and resources, okay? There are a lot of initiatives going around, and so we have to make sure that there's space for this work because it is a microanalysis. It does take a lot of time and energy, and so we want to make sure that we are getting out of it what it can give us by allowing the proper amount of time and resources needed for this work. Okay, forming a self-study committee. So this is where it gets a little tricky. We have to make sure that there are people on the committee that are able to be objective. If you're going to be looking at the science, curriculum throughout kindergarten through 8th grade, and you only have the science lower school specialists and the middle school teachers, is that going to give you an accurate representation? Maybe not. So we need to make sure that we've included people on that committee that are a little bit removed from it and will be able to provide us with more of an objective point of view. And that's representation, that everybody feels like their voice is heard across the different divisions. Okay, organizing the process, who's responsible for what? And when is this going to be done? I'm thinking back about timing and initiatives, and a mistake a lot of times schools make is sending out surveys, right before spring break. Everyone's crabby. So really be purposeful. When are you collecting this data, and how does it relate to the outcomes that you want to make sure you're not just catching people when they're frazzled, but you're really getting thoughtful opinions. So just being mindful where in the school year that you can do this work. Okay, and then determining the data needed, and here's where we're going to spend a lot of time. Okay, what's easily collected is not necessarily the best to look at. Okay, so just because we can get it fast doesn't mean that's where we stop, and that was really the point I was trying to make at the beginning. Just those statistics are a great starting point, but we need to do the hard work that qualitative data can really help us with. The surveys, the interviews, the observations, the deep analysis of our program documents, that's where we can really figure out the hows and the whys, not just the whats of what's happening. I'm going to walk you through then some types of interviews that you might consider doing with your different stakeholders. And by stakeholders, I mean everybody that has a vested interest in the program. That includes your graduates. They really have a lot to say once they leave you, and I say this, I have a student now who's in college, but when she was in high school, she said repeatedly, "I'm so glad you sent me to Sycamore. I already know how to do all of this, and I can think well." And I think, well, good, keep telling me that because I have 3 more I'm paying tuition for, but it's a good testimony, right? So don't neglect that group of stakeholders as well. But your current students, your graduates, parents, teachers, administrators, counselors, anybody who has a kind of perspective, you want to make sure to tap into. Okay, and you can do these different kind of formats of interviews. Unstructured interviews are where you come in, like, tell me what you think about it. Very open-ended. You don't have a list of prepared questions. And the reason that this can be beneficial is it's good when you don't know what the problems are. Sometimes when a new head will come in and wants to kind of get a sense of what people are thinking, I can understand that. But it's very difficult to synthesize or analyze because people have their own agendas, right? And they've got an audience. So they'll focus on, the one thing they're concerned about, and it might not be relevant to anybody else in the school. So you got to be mindful of that. Standardized interviews are the direct opposite. You've got your list of questions and you march it through for everybody, but that's all well and good in that you get the same ability to analyze, but what if you've totally missed the mark about the real problem? Like in the example I shared with you, if the issue is competition and I don't know that, and I have my standardized protocol, that might never come up. So what I think is a sweet spot here are semi-structured interviews. You have a general list of questions, but you let it go where the participant wants it to go. So it's not nearly as restrictive. So it's still focused, this is a benefit, but you can really kind of get a sense of what are the important issues to the community. That requires some practice to be able to navigate that situation and keep it moving in a productive manner. Now there's one other type of interview that you may have participated in or done in the past, focus groups. When we have 6 to 10 people, I have a love-hate relationship with these, mostly hate, but really mostly hate as I think about it. But the reason for that, they're efficient, right? I mean, we can get a lot of people, and a lot of people feel like they've been heard when we do focus groups, but groupthink. And a lot of times, some communities, there's a really dominant parent, and other parents who are more introverted don't feel like they can break into that or question or challenge that parent. Or we've got a longtime faculty member and very opinionated, and a new faculty member might see something, legitimate, but doesn't feel like that he or she can say anything in that context. So just be mindful that even though these are fast and efficient, they might not give you the best results, and try to mix it up with other types of interviews as well. Okay. Now the other mistake people make is not taking advantage. The interviews tell you a lot. So make sure you ask the questions that get at the information you want to hear. So don't ask closed questions like, is, are, was, do. That gives you yes or no, and that's it. It shuts down the conversation. So if you say things like, well, is a middle school math placement effective? Yep, sure is. Okay. Does a lower school language arts curriculum include culturally diverse readings? Yep. Okay, yeah, that one third grade poem was written by an African author. No, you don't know. What exactly is the extent of this? Are students given opportunity to develop appreciation for diverse cultures in Spanish? Yes. But the yes might be we have flags for all the different countries that are Spanish speaking, and that's the extent of it. So if you ask questions like this that are closed, then you lose the rich opportunity that interviews offer us. So instead, make sure you are starting with these kind of prompts. Tell me about, describe, explain. Okay, what do you think about? These are the kinds of things that'll start your participants talking and allow you to really get a sense of what's happening with regard to whatever it is that you're interested in studying. Okay, we all know this, funneling, starting from broad to more specific. You ask your kid, how was the school day? Fine. You don't get anything, right? It's too broad. Well, the same happens with interviews. If you start with something like, what's challenging about middle school language arts? People, they don't know where to start with that. It's too broad. But if you say to a student, well, what's challenging about learning to write an essay? Well, there you start to get something. It's, I can't think of anything to write, or my vocabulary is stunted, or whatever you'll get. But really try to make sure that you are zeroing in and helping them out when it's sometimes challenging for kids to know, or adults, to know where you're going with something. Okay, so surveys, when you develop them, surveys should be tailored to multiple stakeholder groups. Like I said, you want to make sure you're tapping into the perspectives of all the stakeholders because they don't always align, like we found with the perceptions of stress in the school district that I shared earlier. So each of the stakeholder groups can have a survey with targeted questions for them, but they should also have parallel questions to allow for that comparison. Allowing for the narrative comments, because that's, as we saw with the quotes from the students, where you really start to get a sense of what's going on. And reasonable length. Nobody looks forward to filling out a survey, right? If it's going to take longer than 10 minutes, they won't do it. So make sure that you are practicing it ahead of time and being mindful of how precious people's time is. Okay, now just with the interviews, here are some kind of takeaways for your surveys to keep in mind. Use that interview data to help you know what to put on the survey. You know, after we interviewed a lot of those kids, you can better believe competition was something we wanted to ask about in the survey, or the level of stress. So make sure that you are paying close attention to what those interviews are telling you, and then give a chance for the broader community to respond on those particular issues. Here are some more tips. Keeping the survey short, as we just talked about. Including an introduction, you know, heads up, parents, we're going to be conducting this review of our, you know, language arts program, be looking for a survey, so that they don't just automatically delete it or, you know, put it in a junk file or something like that. Okay. Avoid leading questions. This is kind of hard to do because a lot of us have worked really hard on whatever it is that we're going to be evaluating, and we want to make sure we're not leading, you know, participants down a particular path just by the way that we've asked the questions. You know, like this, competition is a real problem. Strongly agree, disagree. Well, it must be if you're asking me about it, right? Or sometimes we have emotionally loaded questions. Unintentionally, we say things like, my child feels anxious solving word problems in math. My child's anxious? Well, she might have been. She groaned the other day when she had that word. Yes, anxiety is a real problem in math. Okay, no. So make sure that you don't kind of lead people or charge up those emotions just by the way you're phrasing things. We're all guilty of this one, simple language. Even though many of our stakeholders are well educated, we still tend to fall into a lot of educational jargon that people just don't know what we're talking about. This was really a question I saw on a survey. In your opinion, to what extent is the curriculum differentiated appropriately to address the cognitive development of learners with advanced potential? I totally understand that question, okay, but parents aren't. What are you talking about? Make it simple, okay, clear and simple. In fact, it's a great idea to field test your survey, give it to, I own 3 middle schoolers now. I always have them read surveys before I send them out to other middle schoolers, but have people read it before and make sure that they can really respond or understand what you're trying to get at. And then making sure that the rating scale is balanced and allows for all the options. Always put do not know on any survey question that you do. And you might think parents should know this or kids should know this, but it's shocking the percentage of parents who will circle that do not know. That tells you something. That tells you have a communication problem frequently because they really do want to know. You can't assume that they're apathetic, but if you're getting a large percentage of that, then you really need to try to, how can I get this information to my parents to make sure that they do understand? Okay, here's one. Not asking multiple things in the same question. The middle school advisory program helps my child develop friendships and coping skills. Well, what is it? Friendship or coping skills. So make sure that it's simple and only one issue to go over in each of the questions. Okay, observations. I put this up here as a placeholder, and I will send you the scale. Classroom teachers. We developed this scale a number of years ago for a federal research grant on gifted education and differentiation in the classroom. But since then, it's gone through a number of iterations. And I love it not for just evaluation, but for teachers to record themselves, and then look at the scale and evaluate themselves. Just as a private, independent exercise. But you can learn a lot about yourself and things you didn't even know you were doing in the classroom. So as you're thinking about this, think about how could you use a tool like this to evaluate yourself. And the reason that, I know you can't see this, I can't even, well, anyway, I will give it to you and I'll explain. This scale is beneficial because it looks at a lot of elements of good differentiation as well as targeted things for gifted education. Okay, so it's looking at student engagement, low, medium, or high. It's focusing on pace of instruction. And this is something that you might not be as aware of, but as you watch the video, you can see all the kids who already knew it and it was too slow, or the confused looks because you went through it too fast. So pace of instruction is something to really focus on. Cognitive activity. not evident, evident, or very evident. So you can look at, am I spending all my time down on the knowledge and comprehension, or am I really getting at that higher level thinking? And what I like about this scale is it forces you to evaluate every 5 minutes. So some scales, they have things like, did you ask higher level questions? Well, if you ask one in the 45-minute class, you have to mark yes. But this makes you look at, I have asked higher level questions, 40% of my questions were. You can kind of document that and really get a sense of the frequency. Learning director, is it all teacher directed or is it all student directed? And neither is probably optimal, right? We want some mix. Classroom management, and then evidence of enrichment and acceleration, and that's what the scale goes on to do. These are activity codes that are kind of less relevant if you're using this for yourself and more relevant for the evaluation piece, so we can move from that. But this is what the scale looks like, and it lets you code every 5 minutes what you're seeing for those different domains that I just talked about, as well as the gifted piece. So are kids given an opportunity for choice? Are they able to research something that's interesting to them independently? Are you using primary sources? Are you using above grade level standards and readings? Interdisciplinary connections, focusing on more of a conceptual understanding rather than just at the topic level. So it lets you get at some of those things we know are important for instruction for gifted learners that you might not be aware of or think about in your own teaching. So I really do encourage you to look at that for yourself. Okay, additional data sources. So we talked about interviews and observations and surveys, but these are all other great ways for you to document whether or not you're developing those skills. Looking across the board at your curriculum plan, the website that you have for your class, student products, the academic competitions, pre and post tests. We always think of pre and post tests in terms of content acquisition, but I'm encouraging you to think about it in terms of skill acquisition. If your goal is to really focus on critical thinking, for example, make sure that you are giving kids a pre-test on those critical thinking skills at the first trimester, the middle, and the end of the year. And after you've taught them models for developing critical thinking, are you seeing growth in that area? That'll help you really drill down and see, again, is what I'm doing actually making a difference for these individual skills? Same with problem solving, creativity, metacognition. Think about all those skills and a way to pre and post those with your students. Okay, so we collect the data and we interpret it, but I'm going to caution you that when we analyze the survey results, we code them for narratives, we look at all that achievement data and the observations, not all the data is created equally. Okay, so make sure you really consider that. And I bring that up because there was a lot of pushback in that example that I shared with you at the beginning about the level of stress. And one of the recommendations in that school district, or one of the problems, was that kids at the high school level were taking summer math classes, so they would exhaust the math curriculum, which would force the school district to pay for them to take math at this prestigious college that was located in the community. And it was all about image, that their child and status was taking math at this, very prestigious university. And so the recommendation was that they needed to cap that and not allow that because it was causing so much stress that there was a panic about suicide. The level of stress in the comments was so high that became a real concern. Well, the parents said, we don't see the stress. The teacher said, we don't see it. But the kids were experiencing it. So even though the data was different, we need to pay attention to what those kids are saying and really give that some additional weight. Okay, when you write up your findings, focusing on strengths, areas of challenge, and recommendations. We don't call them weaknesses, okay, because everybody, if we operate under the assumption that we're all trying to do our best, we all are trying to do the best we can by these gifted kids, and we all have challenges. And so this is a challenge for you, that you have half of your class with an additional exceptionality. That's a challenge. That is something we can address and give you support, but it's a challenge. It's not a weakness that you're not able to do something, okay? So focusing that on the areas of strengths, always coming first, areas of challenge, following up with recommendations that include quick wins as well as a long-term plan. A quick win is a great thing to do that you can immediately put into place that will tell stakeholders that you are serious about this and you're really trying to make a difference. For example, if you're having a communication issue in middle school, parents are complaining, they don't know what's going on down there. Okay, a monthly newsletter, you can start right away, that talks about what the kids are learning in each of the different core content classes and some examples of things that have been happening academically in terms of competitions or sports or whatever the case is. That's a quick win. You can put it into place and parents will say, oh, they're really addressing that communication issue. Other issues are long-term. If you have to revamp for vertical articulation of a particular curricular area, yeah, that's going to take a while. That's not a quick win. But if you organize your findings in such a way, everybody can see that your progress is happening immediately, as well as a long-term strategic plan for that. And finally, sharing your findings, working on your priorities, but being careful not to tackle too much too fast, okay? Change is rough, and even when it's good and it will lead to good things, people get nervous, especially families that have been in a school for a long time. They remember the rites of passage, the bird project in 3rd grade or whatever, and they get upset if things are changing, thinking the program's going downhill. Never used to be like that. So we just have to be really careful, slow, and a lot of communication when we're talking about change that ultimately will lead to improvement. Okay, but I'm hoping that as you're listening to this, you're starting to see opportunities, that you're thinking to yourself, I really do want to focus on creative thinking. I should look into that. I should try to look at how I'm evaluating that. And that you're viewing this as an opportunity, not something to be stressed about or run away from, but something that's not punitive. It's just meant to make sure that we are doing right by the gifted kids that we're entrusted with. And I'll leave you with this quote from my favorite administrator. We are too good not to be better, okay? And that's really the way we need to think about it. We all have fabulous programs and our kids are doing great, but let's not stop there. What else can we do to make sure we're being the best we can be? So, thank you.
Yes, save some time. We have here about 8 minutes for some questions and answers. If you have things you would like to ask Kristie to speak up.
Go ahead.
Is there a next chapter to that story?
It was kind of rough. I mean, I'll tell you honestly, the news got wind of it. It was in the paper, and it was rough. I will say that it was also a cultural difference. A lot of the community had a different cultures that valued that high achievement over the stress, and that it just didn't compute. So they did put that into place. They capped the math. The other thing they did that was did cause a suicide attempt. Graduation, they were printing the graduation with the kids' names and where they were attending school. And one girl attempted suicide because she was so ashamed she didn't get into an Ivy League school. So yeah, but they have made some changes because they just said it's not about what parents want and the prestige, it's about what's good for our kids. So you don't want to be quoted in the paper though. You're reading from Indiana. It's rough. Other comments or questions about the evaluation process? Okay, so thank you.
That was really terrific, and thanks to Kristie again for